Pinky out. A couple weeks ago, I did this phenomenal, amazing video about squats. Well, today what I want to talk about are squats from another dimension. Now, when I'm talking about dimension, I guess what I refer to are the planes of motion. So we have all these different planes of motion, 3 of them to be exact. We have the sagittal plane, which means you're going up and down, you're going forward and backwards. So when I'm in my standard sweet vanilla squat stance, I'm usually moving in the sagittal plane, which just means my feet are underneath my hips or maybe a little bit wider, and I'm going up and down. Pretty easy, right? But there's also the frontal plane. And the frontal plane means that I'm moving side to side. And we also have the transverse plane, which would be rotation. So as we're talking about these squats, what I want you to understand is that just having your feet underneath your hips and being in this very stable position is good for learning. And a lot of people resort to this position because it's the most stable and the most strong. Therefore, they can lift the maximum amount of weight. However, I think when you start exploring the different ranges of motion with the different planes of motion, you could start improving that strength in a way that just straight vanilla doesn't work. Now, what I mean here is that we're going to start talking about, first of all, the split squat. So even though the split squat is an up and down movement, and people will be like, well, isn't that a lunge? Because it looks a lot like a lunge. The difference between a lunge and the split squat is that there is no step. So once you maintain that split stance, your body moves up and down and up like an elevator. And all the different holding positions that I talked about, all the different implements can be used to make that exercise either more challenging or less challenging. So we can be on that spectrum of progression. What happens in that split squat is the fact that while you're going up and down, sagittal plane movement, but there is so much frontal plane resistance that you have to maintain lest you fall over. And here at Fitness Lying Down, we don't want anybody to fall over. So there's a lot of stabilization and balance challenges that come from this. So all those different ways they can do it. Now as we move more into a lateral squat. And people are like, well, is this not a lateral lunge? The same reason why the split squat's not a lunge is the same exact reason why the lateral squat is not a lunge. Because you're not stepping. You take a more wide base, you keep your feet active in the ground, and you are moving side to side in that squatting position. A lot of people will prefer that position over the split squat because you have a larger base of support, and so you're more stable here. But now, as we talked about that split squat, you're resisting frontal plane motion. Well, what happens when I go into frontal plane? Now I have to resist rotation. I have to resist that transverse plane that we talked about. So as I'm moving over to the side, what I can't do is I can't allow my body to turn in the shoulders or turn in the hips, or even, especially more importantly, turn in the knee. This will happen a lot, and then people end up with knee pain because as they're moving into that position, then all of a sudden that knee collapses in, and that's giving into that transverse plane, which, as I mentioned, we are trying to avoid. We can load with so many different implements. We can use kettlebells. We can use ultimate sandbags. We can use resistance bands. We can use mobility balls. There's so many different ways that we can explore this frontal plane squat to make you more successful. And then just kind of on the outset of all that, we've talked about the planes of motion. Now you're thinking, okay, you've resisted the transverse plane of motion, Corey. How do you squat in the transverse plane? I really don't have an answer for that. I'll be honest with you. But what I do like to do, one of my personal favorite squats, is when I go into that squat, and as I drive out of the squat, then I add a little rotation at the end. So my feet, sagittal plane, very base, but the fact that when I come up, I rotate and pivot through that transverse plane. So that can make that squat a little bit more engaging. Squats from a whole different dimension. That's what we're exploring today. As you're turning that calendar page and you're getting ready for November, you're thinking about Planksgiving already, let's enjoy a few more of those squats, shall we? You're welcome.